right, hello and welcome to CherrySTEM number 34. This show is brought to you by you, namely those of you who are patrons, and of course, viewers and listeners. You guys are amazing too, and we really appreciate you joining us for this hour, a bit of an abridged CherrySTEM this time. But I would like to direct your attention to the screen if you'd like to support the show in a direct, meaningful capacity, as well as get some goodies after the show in the form of a patron after show chat. Check out patreon.com/AnnaCherry. I recommend the Challenger mode. It is lewd, but not really, that much. You can avoid all the nudity by staying below the hardcore mode. It is named that for a reason. And of course, you will directly be able to join our after shows, have priority reading of your comments, and a lot of other good things.
Apparently, I'm over here crunching really loudly. Take that.
Not loudly, just... It's not lunch hour, it's STEM hour. Although if you're listening to us during your lunch hour, let's munch together one of these days. We'll have a mukbang CherrySTEM.
That would be great. So one of the other things is we may go a little bit shorter today, but I'm hoping that you'll be inspired to go and deep dive some stuff we're going to talk about, because it's going to be very controversial. You're going to be you're either going to be on one side or the other pretty strong, and that is you're going to be the kind of agnostic, well, I don't know and I don't care, or you're going to be like, no way, that's crap, and so if you think it's either one of those things, I'd like to for you guys to, if you're interested, duke it out in the comments and tell us why you think it's absolute trash and you don't buy none of that crap, or tell us how it's like, whoa, that is a big old pile of weirdness.
Exactly. It'll be fun and good and awesome. But let's start with something non-controversial and actually good news. Hey, good things. We have some of those. Some good news. It's not all doom and gloom and asteroids are going to hit us and other things that we'll get into later that may or may not be so positive. But let's start off with a group of scientists at Kaunas University of Technology, KTU, in Lithuania, have created a biodegradable plastic. Which decays in a compost in a couple of years. It's called, well, it might not have an official name, but the style of material is called a bioplastic. And the one that was created at KTU is transparent. And all the materials in its consumption are suitable for contact with food. So we are talking about replacing the BPA, which already is on its way out, but a lot of plastic water bottles, a lot of plastic processed food containers. There is... Microplastics have been found in, humans as well as animals. And
I think they found at the top of the fucking Himalayas or something. It's it's so bad. It's so bad.
Yeah, it's in the oceans, it's in the air, it's in the mountains, it's in our bodies. And of course, one of my gripes with BPA and plastic waters, the plastic water bottles that were used in the past, and the reason why so many talk about their bottles being BPA free, which is BPA is an acronym for something I don't remember off the top of my head.
Polybisphenol.
It definitely bisphenol A.
There we go.
What is the A? I don't know. It has been implicated in a tremendous amount of prostate cancer specifically. So if you guys know me and what... and
it's one of the major killers of men, period.
Exactly. So if you know which marginalized groups I'm particularly interested in being an activist for, you know why this in particular is kind of an issue for me. It is close to home in a way, because it is a protected group of mine that it targets.
Yeah, and the number of people who are still going to suffer from the long-term effects of BPA, they were talking about how it's going to be the next DDT, because it was one of those things where it just would have long-lasting, far-reaching effects. And I think a lot of people are not going to really know how much they've been affected by the BPA, because now they're finally kind of sweeping it under the rug real quickly. Oh yeah, we didn't do that. Let's get rid of that. Yeah, that was no. Don't hold us responsible. But I think there's a lot of people who are still going to suffer the effects of having been exposed to this toxic chemical in all these different containers, etc.
Yeah. That's one of the things I'm really excited about, moving away from BPA in general, but the fact that we can replace a lot of these things that we use for more conventional plastics that are derived from petroleum products if we can use, naturally created bioplastics, I'm much more in favor of that. So I really
we're choking all the fish and wildlife and all these.
We're
various...
also getting all the fish high, especially in UK where they found tremendous amounts of cocaine in the freshwater shrimp and fish because all the medicines that we take and the drugs that we take run off into the water supply.
Yeah, and people, every time we talk about animals, it always reminds me. It's like, I know there's people out there that's like, well, I don't care about animals for. It's like, because they have a big impact on humans. It's like, we're not trying to save the earth. We're trying to save our own asses. The earth will still be here after we fucking destroy everything that supports us and keeps us alive. It'll still be here. We're not trying to save the earth. We're trying to save our own asses. That's what we're trying to say.
Yeah, we didn't evolve in space in a vacuum of nothingness. We evolved on this planet in cooperation with other animals that we use for food, for shelter, for medicines, for a variety of things. We are an interdependent ecological system, and to see humans as completely aside and apart from this ecological system in which we evolved in is just kind of, well, the same as not believing in evolution. So it has its place among some peoples, and I won't pass a judgment onto them, but let's just say I'd like to take a different direction because it helps me predict and prognosticate and in general have a better handle on my world, and I like that. No moral judgment, just
Well, I remember when
just usefulness.
Yeah, when I was first kind of looking at, because I went from being taught creationism and all that when I was younger, and then it's once I started understanding how much useful information is available just to understanding, just increasing your theory of mind. Basically, by not understanding that we are primates, there's all these different things that humans do that make no sense at all. You just have to accept carte blanche as just, that's just what humans do, and they're unpredictable, and who knows why they do all these things. And then you find out, some primatology and stuff, and you're like, oh, all this shit completely fucking makes sense. It's stupid, but it completely makes sense and is predictable and fits within, a very easily understood set of circumstances. And so it's like, yeah, there's some use there. I think there's so many religious people who are now at least accepting the idea that God created the world through evolution, and so they know that it doesn't have to. They don't have to give up their religious beliefs to, understand that this is just a method by which God did stuff. So at least there is that, thing that I think has been kind of that's pretty common nowadays. A lot of people don't, feel like that that it in any way countermands or contradicts their belief in God to, understand the world around them a little better. So that's cool. What you typing over there?
I derped on the title of the screen. So it is.
Did you derp on anything else? Are we broadcasting? Can they hear us?
Yes.
We've done this before.
As far as, somebody's responding to antibiotics comments, so they definitely can hear us.
Good.
And I do have, thanks to YouTube analytics of average watch time, current viewers, playbacks, all of that good stuff. So yeah, we are definitely broadcasting, and we can definitely be heard. I just didn't include the proper title, so my bad on that. My mistake. So yeah, all right. That's good news. Bad news. So yeah, the insulin. I'm sure you guys have heard about those dirty illegal immigrants crossing the border just to get medicine. Yeah, we're talking about Americans going to Canada to get insulin. That's a real thing that's happening, and I was kind of curious as to why. And part of me assumed that it had to do with the general insurance, healthcare, lack of universal healthcare, that whole problem in the U.S. But apparently, insulin prices have been skyrocketing. So it's not just that people may not have the kind of coverage they used to have and came to rely on in one way or another, but it's that the prices in general themselves are going up. So not only are people going to Canada to get their own insulin but there is a Bay Area biohackers group that started the Open Insulin Project, where they are attempting to create their own insulin. So biohackers.
So that's the good part of it.
Yes, that's the good part of it.
Bring it back around.
Yeah, bioplastics, biohacking, the good bio stuff. But I mean, of course, it's not in any kind of complete form. At this point, the Open Insulin Project has managed to genetically engineer yeast cells to produce an insulin precursor. So it is still very much in the early stages of it, but it looks promising. Anthony DeFranco, no relation, to Philly D, the group's founder, recently told.
But he still loves your face.
Recently told Deutsche Welle that in a corner of any room, you could make enough for 50,000 to 100,000 people. That it doesn't require much in terms of labor to produce a substantial amount of insulin. So once they get this project, fully developed, that should be very, very good. However, of course, the process of making insulin, genetically engineer some yeast, etc., that may seem simple, but keep making it safe for people. That may not be so simple. And so, bless the project and give it lots of luck in its attempt to take care of this issue that we are now having. I mean, diabetes is kind of a big problem.
Kind of.
In fact, I have this awesome new thing that is very, very new study, research. And I mean, that's part of New Seed, that we give you guys lots of new stuff that just recently came out. So this one was in April 1st. So yeah, early April, not necessarily super new, but there's awesome converging evidence that suggests that the mesolimbic dopamine system is directly affected by the increase in inflammatory cytokines, which are associated with chronic low-grade inflammation. So this idea of can't or won't engage in exercise, for instance, specifically, actually comes down to low-grade inflammation. And one of the things that the study points out, and others, is that the amount of disorders that are linked to actually food, the way we ingest it, and the way it produces inflammation in our bodies. And there's pretty much a direct link now to our dopamine system and the specifically aspects of dopamine system that have to do with a willingness to expend effort for reward.
Yeah.
So.
You wonder where willpower comes from? It comes from dopamine.
Yep.
I mean, unless you want to believe your brain is magic. And then in which case we can't really help you. But there is specific things. The whole idea of willpower, there is this interplay between thoughts and neurochemicals, and that is kind of like water in a riverbed. There's a feedback loop there. Water over time changes the course of the riverbed, and the riverbed is what's guiding the water. Same thing is true of your thoughts and your neurochemicals, because they are basically the same thing occurring, but one is a little more short term, one's a little more long term. But either way, there's a direct correlation between these things that you can track down. And when it comes to willpower, that is something that is that comes from something. And it comes from receptor densities. It comes from how active your dopamine system is. And so what's funny is I've actually kind of tracked it down to people who are a little more on the conservative side tend to have a little bit better dopamine system and are usually a little more forceful in their personality because of that. And it is kind of a little bit of a privilege, I suppose, that they don't really recognize usually that they have this impetus. They
just have more willpower. It's easier for them to pull themselves up
because
by
the world. Yeah, exactly. Because the world is more satisfying, and and they have more gusto coming through every day in their. Some of it does have to do with thought patterns. In other words, if you're a more depressive and more it is important that you manage your mind, and that can help some. But there are things that happen in your health that can make it where you do not have as much of a impetus, as much of a viewpoint, as much of a where does that energy come from? You wake up in the morning. A lot of people don't just wake up in the morning. They feel, and people who do, a lot of times they feel like that's me. That's all me. No, it's not all you. There's a lot that has to do with your health and your genetics and a whole lot of things that have nothing to fucking do with you, but they happen to benefit you and make you have a little more willpower. And some people have less, but then each one of us has these waves that go up and down, and knowing that there is something that you can kind of start a feedback loop headed in the right direction. You can always start a feedback loop that heads in the wrong direction as well. Thinking depressively, not allowing yourself to go in that direction mentally a little more instead of reaching for more of satisfaction. That's what dopamine is mostly related to. And so there is a both desire and satisfaction are related to dopamine. In other words, when you're looking to the future and keeping your eyes on the prize, and a lot of those things that have to do with kind of your typical coach tropes, what your coach would tell you to do, keep your eyes on the prize, or
a typical successful person
right.
tropes.
a lot of those things are kind of important to as a pathway to kind of beat down into your head and have like a cause a beaten path. I don't know if you you go. We were just out and kind of in the woods, and there was these little pathways down that go through the woods in our park, and it's like, well, where did that pathway come from? Well, it came from people kind of taking the same path through the woods repeatedly, and eventually kind of the grass gets beaten down. And so the same thing happens in your brain. It's like the more that you're doing something, the easier it is to traverse that area. And you kind of create a beaten path in your brain through habit. So a lot of those tropes that all the coaches and things like that have, they are they're valuable. They're something that is important, and that is basically setting yourself up to have dopamine too. And so a lot of that has to do with thankfulness, but it can
also
go
known
wrong.
as prayer sometimes.
Yeah, a lot of times people who are in a habit of praying, they're focusing on their thankfulness.
To recap, what we're started, not to recap, but to sort of add a little more context before we go any further, what we were talking about, in case our mic was a little low at the time, we have noticed, or we have tracked scientific evidence and psychological studies, etc., that indicate that people who label themselves or consider themselves to be on the conservative spectrum, towards the conservative side anyway, right wing, etc., they tend to have a more healthy dopamine system.
Yeah. So it's it is kind of a forward looking. I mean, and everything can go wrong. I mean, there is a that's the thing. I really feel like everybody should kind of be at a balance of having both the conservative and liberal viewpoints. And I think a lot of people who consider themselves conservative or liberal tend to be more towards the middle. I think that's the dominant group, whereas we hear a lot from those extremists at both ends. But I think that most people are a lot closer to the middle than the people that we tend to hear from a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that's really the healthy area, because there is a give and take and a loss to, like we were just talking about, all the positive things that have to do with that, keeping your eyes on the prize, moving forward, thinking about the future. Well, when you're, a lot of times that can become obsessive behavior, and you're so obsessed with looking to the future that you eventually become dissatisfied and nothing will satisfy you. And so you're always chasing after that dopamine. And so it's you end up being a bit like a drug addict. You end up being like a cokehead. That is you tend to bring your brain into that path so far where you're not being more thankful for what you have, and you're always focused on the future instead of on the present and on what you already have, and and making sure to check. So there's and that's the thing is so in the other direction, that pulling back and saying, okay, well, being satisfied with what I've got already, and there are things that are kind of more towards the middle end that goes back towards the liberal perspective, which can go, of course, off the rails as well, where you end up in analysis paralysis, because you're looking at instead of moving forward, you're trying to decide what's the right way to go, and everything is a little dissatisfying, because it's like, well, I'm not sure if that's a good way or that's a good way, and all of those things. That is kind of more the a liberal leaning perspective that can, when it goes wrong, you can kind of be stuck in this not moving forward sort of perspective. And so there's
some people would say, what's wrong with going forward? What's wrong with being completely
if you go just straight forward, you're not stepping back and saying, is this the right direction? Is this the good way?
Am I being an idiot?
Am I being an idiot? Am I dissatisfied? Or it's like, what's the difference between being dissatisfied with your life and having ambition? Well, there really isn't a difference. It's just one can go too far. Having a little bit of ambition is about continual improvement of yourself and those things around you. But everybody knows that you're wanting to improve your life and improve yourself and move forward can become an obsessive focus, where you end up sacrificing your family, sacrificing your actual happiness to be chasing after something that because you're not satisfied with it. I gotta get the bigger house, the bigger car, gotta have this, gotta have that. You gotta keep upgrading, kind of keep going forward, and you're never happy with anything. And so you can see how this never satisfied goes along with that dopaminergic system. But it's like you have to have both the satisfaction and the desire, looking forward to the future, but not overcome with desire. You can't be overcome with desire or overcome with satisfaction, being completely complacent with your life. And that's where there is being satisfied and thankful for your life can go overboard. It's what's wrong with being thankful? What's wrong with being happy with what you've got and focusing on everything that you have is good enough instead of constantly having to chase after more? Well, eventually that being overly complacent means that you're not moving forward with the world. The world continues to continues to take things, continues to be injuries because things are changing, and so that's why you have to have this continually
Also,
trying to improve, because otherwise you'll get left behind.
and of course, there's the idea that we're talking about thankfulness, and sometimes those who are not focusing on thankfulness believe that everything they gained, they're entitled to.
Oh yeah, oh god.
Which
yeah.
is the defining trait of conservatism. But on the other hand,
you mean like overly fundamentalist kind of, that when you're going too far and you believe that...
Republican, because the lack of social programs for elderly, lack of any kind of safety nets.
Right, it's like, I did it all, and it's basically, it's just being a fucking simpleton. It's like, no, you didn't. You had the help of your family. You had the help of the generations of people who created roads, and there's all these people who are doing all of these various jobs that are supporting you, and if you're not looking at that, then you're an arrogant piece of shit.
Right, and so being thankful is actually a very, very important attitude that comes from the left that we all need to adapt. But at the same time, as you were saying, that has its drawbacks of being too complacent.
Right, and it's the same thing with pride. Once again, what we're talking about right there was being overly prideful. But at the same time, you do have to give yourself some credit. You do have to say, yeah, I did something and it was good, and and it's satisfying that I did good things, and I believe I did good things, and I did fucking work hard. And and it did end up paying off. Just recognizing that a lot of things are not in your control, and when it comes to circumstances, that's what the humility is about. And that's why a lot of good religions teach you about humility. Now, you don't want to be you don't want to be so humble that you believe you're a piece of crap all the time, and believe everyone else is a piece of crap, and then you're just stuck in this depressive, I'm shit, you're shit, everybody's shit. And it's like, I hate it when people have that kind of perspective. It's like, no, you're not shit when you're actually trying hard, and even if things aren't going well, even if it's not going the direction that you want, you're not making the progress you want, you're still seeing yourself as shit is just a self-limiting, prophecy. You have to see that it's like, I have made, even when the small strides, it's because I put work into it with the situation, with what I had there. And it's like, yeah, I'm going to try to change the situation. Yeah, I'm going to try for more, but I have to be satisfied that I did what I could with what I had, so.
And apologies for the background noise. I was just thinking last night that our cat doesn't seem to be playing with his toy that much anymore, and as soon as we started the podcast, he decided to play with it again. So that's what that is. But bringing it back to our point, this finding should illuminate and give compassion to people who do have a strong dopamine system, to realize that in our current age of the SAD, Standard American Diet, and how much it promotes low-grade chronic inflammation, as well as a lot of people are on antihistamines or a variety of other
I just
allergies.
Saw a study today. This is a great example.
Mm-hmm.
It's like what you're talking about is there's these things that start from early in life, like kids being fed a ton of sugar fucks with their insulin from the very, very fucking early on, and that changes so much.
And that changes their ability to exercise.
You know what else they found out? How everything's switching to very blue LED lights and stuff.
Yeah.
That massively alters a child's circadian rhythm. It's a child's circadian rhythm that when they are exposed to high blue lights later at night, it's not as much for adults and anywhere near as much as it is for children. It alters their circadian rhythm and makes it difficult for them to sleep. And when they don't have the appropriate sleep, it causes stress hormones. It changes to their brain, and so it basically makes them more of a and also makes them more of a risk taker, seeking out thing. It's just there's all these things that change their brain overall, and it can actually lead them towards anhedonia, which is anhedonia is a state at which the world is less satisfying. In other words, everybody who hasn't if you haven't been exposed to anything other than alcohol, you really don't understand that there are very different sets of wait. Okay, I'm getting the move along. There's different sets of circumstances that I got.
If I'd like for you to acknowledge it, I would have said it out loud. The whole point is signaling to you from behind the scenes that nobody knows.
Yeah, but you got me. You totally distracted me. I lost my train of thought.
Well, it's just it is supposed to be short, and I'm noticing us going off away from the.
Okay, well let's move on then.
The thing, but
you got me.
I'm sorry, but also that goes to basically the point is have more empathy for other people that you feel are not as good at things as you, such as people who don't exercise. Maybe they can't because of the way inflammation affects their dopamine system. And also, as you were saying, children, Generation Z,
so many different technologies that fuck them. But
Yeah.
at the same time, there is hope, and that is understanding it.
Yes.
Understanding it means you can find tools, and if you can find tools, you can overcome the problems. But the point is, instead of believing in this bootstrap bullshit, you can see that it's like, yeah, there are disadvantages, there are advantages, there's shit, and so you've got to find the way around instead. And that is the more. Instead, it's not saying give everybody a pass and an excuse and we're all just fall apart and not even try. Instead, it's look at what is causing all of these problems. Don't pay no attention to them. Don't believe they don't exist, but find the sources of them and help find the way around it. If you are one of those people who are suffering from these various disadvantages, know that there is a way around if you can search for it. It's not just this intractable problem that you can't do anything with. That there is some way that you can find tools, you can figure out what's wrong, and just always believing that there is a way around is the thing that I wanted to emphasize.
Mm-hmm. And that perfectly leads into our next topic, which I'd like to get to the space topic, but also give our patrons in the after show a bit more time because we are really pressed for time today. Unfortunately, we had a project sprung on us at the last minute that we literally found out about yesterday in the middle of the night, last night, going to sleep. So we would like to be able to do these CherrySTEMs every Monday, but schedule is not the best. So sorry in advance. I'm sorry to everybody. I'm sorry to my co-host. I'm sorry to our viewers. I'm definitely.
No, I mean you mean. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you for putting up with our need to have a shorter schedule, and thank you for not being frustrated with me trying to hurry things along as a show dominatrix with my whip. So thank you very much for your patience and for your understanding. But what you were saying perfectly leads into our next topic, which is neurofeedback. Study published in 2019. Excuse me, you were doing neurofeedback when I met you, which was almost 13 years ago. So,
yep.
New study, my butt.
I know, right? There's so much information available already back then. It's just, it's people, they needed to be part of consensus before they'll accept it. Doesn't matter if there's mountains of evidence. If it's not consensus, if some group of elders hasn't put their stamp of approval on it and their opinion, people it's amazing how much even people in science are driven by opinion.
And in this case, it almost seems to be who's going to fund that, because the study that came out in 2019 looked at military specifically. So let's talk about what we're talking about. Neurofeedback. Of course, if you notice down below in the description of the show, there will be an RSS link to this podcast. You can also go to patreon.com/AnnaCherry, and all of the supplemental information from this show will be included there. They are public posts. You can click on the CherrySTEM tag that is there on the front page, or you can go to posts and just scroll through until you find a public post, as all CherrySTEM episodes are, and all the information will be there. So we're talking about neurofeedback and the way it's revolutionizing stress management, and we have the actual study as well as the Medium article around it, which you may or may not need a subscription to read. So let me just do some excerpts from it. I believe you get up to 3 free reads a month. So if you want to use it on anything, use it on this. And we're basically talking about how fear, stress, and anxiety are some of the biggest dangers to our mental health. In fact, Generation Z has been known to have the most depression and anxiety of all other generations currently. So the amygdala, which you've heard us talk about before, probably many times, is a brain structure involved in emotional experiences such as fear and anxiety, also social learning. So stressful experiences can adjust the sensitivity of the amygdala, but of course it depends on how you classify those experiences, how you interpret them. So one of the beneficial things that some people do for irrational phobias is exposure therapy. So they repeatedly expose themselves to the fearful stimulus in order to desensitize the fearful response, because it's in a safe setting, and so they can rewrite some of that association with the stressful stimulants. Same with post-traumatic stress disorder, and that's what the study was looking at. It was looking at soldiers and post-traumatic stress disorder. And one of the things that you can do is experience the feelings that would trigger an episode of post-traumatic stress disorder. However, you can do it in a way that decouples the memory from the experience. So you're having the sensation, the stress in your amygdala without necessarily activating all of those memories and having flashbacks and all of that. So how are they helping soldiers do that? Well, the way neurofeedback exists, the way neurofeedback works as it exists currently, is that you basically, it's a training program where you can have the computer system give you positive or negative feedback based on what it is that you're doing.
Brain activity. Specifically brain activity.
Yes. You actually have it hooked up to your head and all of that. Basically, what you do is you experience whatever it is they want you to experience, or controlling an avatar, or just, doing some sort of game-like experience. And whenever your brain goes to the right frequency, let's say alpha brainwave, in a case that I was exposed to when I first learned about neurofeedback, the training was to find where your completely relaxed, meditative, not specifically meditative, but a completely relaxed, like easygoing alpha brainwave state is. And whenever you reach that, so you try to do that, however you try to do that, you relax, you lay back, you think of good things, and whenever your brain activity reaches the alpha brainwave state, the game will reward you. The neurofeedback will reward you. And so you try to reach that again. And so as you were talking about the beaten path, you're essentially trying to do that. You're trying to train your brain how to relax on command, because you may not know what it is you're specifically doing, but you are training muscle memory in a way in your brain.
Yeah, it's a lot like muscle memory in the brain, but it's for your whole brain, getting you to a specific point. It's just like, for instance, a lot of times you can get dogs to do really complex stuff, and they don't really know what they're doing along the way. But
they just want that treat,
right? And it's not even that. They don't think about it. It's right. They feel about it, and it's the feelings that guide them in the background.
If you ever danced, you ever been a dancer or anything like that, or know dancers, there's a curious thing that happens with choreography, where after a while, once you start learning specific steps to a specific song, after a while you're not consciously making your body move. It just knows when to do what to do based on the music, based on the sequence. It's
or if you can remember the first time you were taught to drive, how conscious you were of where your foot was and where the brake pedal was and where your hands were on the wheel and all that nonsense that made it really difficult. Or better yet, if you remember when you first started playing golf, where it's like, you got to move your hip here, hold it like this, twist it that way, move this, there's like 400 different things you're supposed to remember. And if you get caught up in thinking of every single one of those things, there's no way you're just going to slice the ball into the fucking woods every shot. But if you can get to the point where your body is just doing it, you're not thinking about it at all. You're just doing it. I guess that's true with baseball, with a lot of different sports. Mm-hmm. There's this kind of automated response. Well, that sort of thing you want to train for the way that your mind feels, the habitual, how you feel in the background. You want to be able to train that same kind of thing. Well, that's what neurofeedback is for.
Yep. It's essentially the subconscious finding ways to achieve the goals that you set for it. And one of the greatest ways to train your subconscious is with a reward. So that is one of the things that they're employing. The main thing that they're employing in neurofeedback is to train your brain based on rewarding stimuli. And so in this case, they used soldiers, and they gave them a little avatar to move around the screen, and they made the thing. They moved it around, and they learned how to not have a very stressful response to a stressful situation.
Okay, so
training their amygdala.
What you described earlier, by the way, I think you said exactly the opposite. You said made them have the stress instead without the experience, and I think what you mean is have the experience without the stress.
Yes.
Right.
Well, in other words, what I meant is that they're experiencing the stressful trigger. So sight, sound, whatever that is activating their amygdala
without feeling stressed.
Right.
So decoupling the memory, which is situational, from the feelings that come with it, and that's the point. Is to try to disconnect those things.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So, since we're talking about the military, let's move on to our best and greatest topic that is really not news at all for those who've been paying attention, but it's just been quite affirmed recently. And if you have that Facebook video, we could play a portion of it.
I could, I could send it to you here.
Excellent, please do. But basically, the question is, how seriously should we take the recent reports of UFOs? Well, ask the Pentagon. Speaking of the military, it is quite very much a thing that UFOs confirmed, guys. Like,
yeah, well, it's
confirmed.
not,
period.
Confirmed by the military directly, by the Navy now most recently. Okay, so like
Right.
there was the confirmation that came out with these various videos that were associated with this one particular guy who was part of a program that was like $23 million program or something, which really isn't that big of a budget. I mean, people talk about that being a huge budget, but compared to other military things, I don't know, it doesn't seem like that much. Mm-hmm. But the point is, it's now kind of been just released again in the past couple weeks that it's specifically the Navy back in 2004 saw hundreds and hundreds of sightings of these UFOs where they perform maneuvers where they move at speeds that are far beyond our current technology, and they perform maneuvers that should be completely against principles of physics as we currently know them.
Yes, in fact, there's a most recent one, which the first article that we have is 2018, where the SETI and Pentagon have confirmed it. Not to mention, we have this awesome newsreel we're going to show you, but this one that came out in May 26, 2019 on New York Times. Here's a quote by a lieutenant of the Army, I think. I'm not entirely. Oh, he's a F/A-18 Super Hornet pilot who's been with the Navy, as you were saying, for 10 years. So the Navy, that's right. Lieutenant in the Navy said these things would be out there all day. Keeping an aircraft in the air requires a significant amount of energy. With the speeds we observed, 12 hours in the air is 11 hours longer than we'd expect.
Yeah, of course.
So
there's a variety of things that are just.
Right.
Way beyond now. I mean, of course, most people are going to want to believe, well, it's like, well, it's just that means somebody's got some massive technology, and maybe it's just the
Russians or the Chinese.
Oh no, it's not. Then they'd be doing bad things, but because they're the bad guys.
Right.
But which sorry, I don't. I'm kind of saying that tongue in cheek because it's funny. But anyway, the one of the things that's like that most people try to default to right away is that, well, it's just high technology, and these people that don't have the clearance level to know about this high technology that the U.S. has, and that's why they're allowed to be seeing it. And that's what most people are going to default to really quickly. And I'm going to go over a whole bunch of other things here that show a pattern of information that support a very different viewpoint. But first, let's go ahead and address that one thing, and specifically the pilots who are very well known, that have reported these things. One of the things that they did do is it pissed them off that specifically, when you are a fighter pilot, there are fucking procedures. There are ways that you do things, and not just that. If you're a part of the government and if you're a part of the military, there are certain rules you do not fucking break. Period. Fucking period. And that is one of the things that they had that pissed them off, is these things that would zip right into the middle of their formations, which is totally, the unexpected, out of nowhere. That is a super hyper dangerous thing. So if you want to believe that it's some sort of drone
or their
own
have, people,
then you also have to believe that somehow these people who are taking care of the most advanced technology that we have are also these hyper irresponsible people, totally breaking all military protocols. So if you want to believe that.
And they haven't been sacked
fine,
somehow.
Sure. Yeah, sure. That's you can believe that. But these objects, one of the guys who described it was like a square inside of a sphere. This is from the military people. This is now public knowledge that you can look up. But here,
forget SETI, but Pentagon. The Navy, come on.
Yeah, so this was all the way back in 2004. They've known about it for a really long time, and they're only just now kind of coming out and saying, yeah, okay, there's just massive amounts of evidence, and these things, all the different things like turning 90 degrees in midair as it's traveling, at absurd speeds, accelerating way faster than our technology says is possible. Period. It is possible to do it. These things are literally doing things that are impossible. But now let me go and go over a wide variety of things. That's why I really like this 13 reasons to believe aliens are real thing is a great little thing, because I don't know if most people aren't aware that there are that we now estimate there are 40 billion Earth-like planets in the Goldilocks zone just in our galaxy. Not in all the other galaxies, but just in our galaxy, there is 40 billion planets that can support life like ours.
I remember when they were first searching for the first planet in the Goldilocks.
We wonder if they exist at all. Yeah. It's like, no, we now estimate, we found so fucking many of them that there's 40 billion in our galaxy alone. Okay, then you can combine that with the fact that we found life forms that, you know, they live in acid, in salt, solid rock, boiling, frozen, and in the vacuum of outer space, and at 2,000 times the amount of radiation that would melt a human. So in other words, the extremities that life can exist in are far beyond what we once believed, and all of these, a lot of the history of our disbelief came from these specific things. Then there's also, the recent astronomical observation of an interstellar object accelerating without an accelerant. Okay, so this is the
Muamua.
Muamua, I think.
Muamua.
Yeah, is that the right name of it? I don't know. It's Hawaiian, and it's so this is an interstellar object that we tracked coming in from outer space, and then it accelerates. Okay, it's accepted. Well, first off, by the entire community, that it definitely does accelerate at a speed that is faster than any kind of asteroid. So therefore, it behaves like a comet, but it is also accepted, period, that there is no accelerant, there's no outgassing, anything. So there's no reason for it to be accelerating other than there being some sort of engine in it. Right. That's a Momoa. Then, then of course you combine that with the detailed recordings of sightings going back hundreds and thousands of years. There's some,
if you are a fan of 14th and 15th century religious art, there's some really interesting Jesus paintings with saucers in the background.
Yeah,
I kid you not. It's a thing.
All of those things seem like nonsense until you start putting together this larger picture.
I'm just saying, we have sightings
where you look at it from 1,000
14th
different angles, and they all give you the same picture. And that is like, for instance,
to some people, that is not the way that they believe things. They'd rather see one picture of Jesus with the UFO saucer behind him rather than 20 scientists telling them.
That all of these things that point to the same information. Well, the way I work is if 1,000 different things point to the same thing, then that is grants it more validity, not just because somebody important said it. Then another information,
or somebody important disqualified it.
Right. If you've looked into any of the one of the things that's really amped up recently is these sightings that are specifically triangular formations of these particular dot-like. These are the ones that the pilots do describe. And one of the favorite places, the Hesdalen Lights over Norway, and that's in Hesdalen, Norway, where it's just pretty much constant that they're always seeing and recording these UFOs that are going, they're once again defying any kind of physical explanation.
Would you like to run this video in the background on mute as we continue talking on a higher speed, or should we actually listen to it?
I think it's entertaining. Okay, so this is
because it goes from so old to so new news reports. It's
Go ahead and play it.
This is only a 6-minute video.
It's so entertaining. Go ahead.
The other one that we saw was like 20, 30. It was a really long video.
The number of sightings of the same phenomena all over the Earth and recently, and that go right along with this this Navy. I mean, of course, now the other fellow that was a couple of years ago, who was part of that government program to discover whether or not the UFOs were real. The one thing that they have determined, however, is that the UFOs are not a threat. That is what the military, because it's been such a long-standing phenomenon that has been observed so frequently that they basically have moved on. It's like, okay, they're not interfering, they're not interacting. We have other things to do. We got other fish to fry, and that's basically the military. What they do about it. So there's no point in them messing with it anymore. They know it's there. There's nothing they can do about it, and they're not hostile. So I mean, after they observed these guys for going on a few months, the ship that was observing them eventually just left the area to go to Iraq area and continue something that was more important to them. In other words, UFOs are just no longer important to them because they don't. When there's nothing you can do about it, and it's not gaining you any advantage, and it's not changing all that much. Then it's okay. It's a phenomenon. We can deal with that later. We got bigger fish to fry because they're not a threat. So that's the thing. The military doctrine around it is they are not a threat. They're not a concern. They're therefore not not really even. They're just old news, but they are there. So you want to go ahead and play that because we got some other interesting things that go right along with this. Like for instance, I'll go ahead and mention it before you play it. And that is that was it specifically what is it? Okay, everybody's probably heard about the first probe dropped on the moon, and the moon rang like a bell. You probably heard about that if you've ever been interested in any of the moon stuff. Well, what was the most recent thing that they discovered?
Gotta talk about it later.
Oh, you're gonna have to talk about it later. Okay. Well, anyway, another thing that they found is all these mysterious flashes of light on the moon's surface that nobody knows what causes them, and they last for hours, and they're large, and the most they can think of is some sort of swamp gas.
That's part of the moon thing.
Yeah. Okay. So I was just giving a little preview. Go ahead.
Cool. Yeah, we have a natural transition from UFOs to the moon. Because that was basically our last thing. Yeah, the moon. And it is in the title, Metal Moon.
All right.
But yeah, the flashes of light that were on the moon. Are you tying this with the UFOs potentially, or?
Well, I'm just pointing out that there's all of this space-based phenomena and idea. Like the only thing left that anybody could argue is like, well, it took them too long to get here. Well, first off, if you're basing that on relativity, which is what it's typically based on,
that's false.
It would. Well, aside from that, that would not affect the traveler. In other words, it would take a long period of time from the perspective of the people on each planet. But according to relativity, if you're traveling very close to the speed of light, you would end up being slowed down such that your travel could be in like a single human lifetime. You could travel thousands of light years because the space between places actually changes when you reach speeds close to the speed of light. And then there's other questions about acceleration that I don't really want to get into, but there are those things can be shown to be erroneous as well. Point is that there aren't any reasons why other civilizations could not travel here and within their lifetime, even if you buy the mainstream narrative, even if that you can't actually think outside of the box of whatever consensus is. It's still you're still okay. You're not breaking your consensus religion to believe that it's possible for for actual aliens to have visited here. But go ahead.
And possibly have a base on the moon is what you're basically getting to.
All right, we'll go ahead and play this. This is a fun little thing.
All right, let's do this.
Nighttime skies over the weekend. You see anything strange? Many of our viewers did. Some even caught the glowing orbs on tape.
Glowing orbs flowing high in the air.
Thousands of people saw these 4 mysterious lights in the sky outside Phoenix Monday night. The United States Air Force said it could not identify them. Air traffic controllers from 2 different airports say they saw the lights, but they definitely were not from any of their airplanes.
Above the skies of Northeast and East El Paso tonight, a sight that was a little more than stunning. This is what one of our photographers, Ray Moreno, caught on video. One solitary light that appears to be falling in the sky. But that light suddenly breaks apart into 2, then 3 separate lights. Those lights then just freeze in the air and begin to hover.
This is the weird, unsettling sight Paul, a longtime pilot, captured on tape. Mysterious red lights in a diagonal formation, just hovering above his yard in Whippany.
Strange lights over the skies of San Diego.
Strange lights over Lake Erie.
Over Phoenix, Arizona.
A group of unidentified flying objects in the sky over Manhattan.
UFOs were kind of flying over Chicago.
This is just a great mystery. What is this in the East Texas sky?
The same orbs have been spotted in London, Mexico, Canada, California, and Texas.
So this is something that's in the sky that people do not know what it is.
On 7 News at 5:30, a strange sighting above Boulder County a week ago. 3 lights in the night sky. The folks who saw them are asking,
what the fuck?
What the hell is that?
What in the world is this?
I have no idea what the hell that is. And I'm about to shit my pants.
Yes, it simply seems to be an interesting wave of sightings.
Check this out. The 3 lights are close to each other, then spread out into this triangle pattern. Now, look at the patterns side by side. This from Manhattan and the other tonight in El Paso. I gotta tell you, they do look eerily similar.
If it looks familiar, it should. Remember the Phoenix lights from the late 90s? Thousands saw the triangular glow in the night sky. The military said they were flares. Many are still skeptical.
Could these lights have been flares dropped from planes, which some say explains the Phoenix phenomenon? But flares fall from the sky. These did not, as you saw, so the mystery continues.
And I would like to, there's still a couple more minutes on this, and we will link this particular video in the chat right now.
Yeah, there's some films of like, literally like hundreds of them in the sky.
Yes.
Like hundreds.
And I'd also like to point out that, yes, for those who are latecomers to the show and just tuned in, the military, specifically the Navy and the Pentagon, in 2018 and 2019 are now saying that they don't know what it is. Okay? They're not saying it's swamp gas like they used to. They're not saying it's flares like they used to. They're saying they don't fucking know what it is.
And the funny thing is, when you look into it, it's kind of don't know, don't care. It's like, which is kind of weird. But I mean, I kind of see it. It's like if you've been observing this shit for years and years and years, and it has absolutely no impact, then eventually you got to get back to business. Eventually, it's like, okay, we can't do anything about it. It's just there. It's just stuff. It's like the military giving a shit about what's going on in astronomy. They don't. They're doing their military thing. You know, they got bigger fish to fry. If it's not, and that's what every report has come back. They are not a threat. They are not a threat. Not a threat. Because that's their whole job is threat assessment, and they've assessed it and said it is not a threat repeatedly. Then basically at this point it's just moving forward and and it kind of ignoring it. And so that seems to be the way that the government is handling it. It's like we've got to deal with all of our various wars that we're doing all over the planet, and because we do have war going on almost everywhere on the planet right now.
To the point where generals in the Pentagon have no idea where exactly we're having all the different wars that we are.
Yeah, we've got so many different deployments of people across the planet that we just don't know. So it's like, yeah, we got other things we're doing. We're killing people.
Don't care. For sure. That's, and as I was mentioning, Patreon.com.
Places to go, people to kill.
Patreon.com/AnnaCherry will have an upload of the audio of this whole talk, as well as every single citation that we have based our information on. And the latest two, as I was saying, came out in 2018, where the Pentagon doesn't know what they are. And in 2019, we had Navy confirming that the way these things operate is outside of current capabilities of our own guys or any science.
Outside of our science, okay, not just outside of our technology, but outside of our scientific understanding of how this must occur. It's like there's things that it doesn't. Things aren't supposed to work like that. There's effects of inertia that have to be overcome, and these things are not acting like that.
And as you were saying, some of the pilots were extremely frustrated and upset with this because the way these objects moved into the middle of their formation and violated other protocols that are just so hardwired into the way that pilots and the Navy and all of them work.
Well, the whole military,
yeah.
there are certain protocols that there are things you do and you do not fucking ever do. Period.
So it's hard to believe that there are going to be that many loose cannons flying,
operating the most advanced technology that exists,
known to man.
Right, that is above the level of the military. Yeah, they're going to go and just fly right in the middle of some military jets and fuck with them. Right, that makes sense.
Yeah. So speaking of things that don't make sense. The moon. So yeah, aside from mysterious flashes on the moon, which I'll let you talk about in a minute. Now, well, okay, you know what? Let's start with the flashes. Let's go with that, and then that was a little older information that, in other words, it came out a couple of years ago. However, we have information that came out just this year. So this one was, well, actually, this article was also written in 2019. In particular, but the evidence of lights flashing on the moon has been, it went back to,
1950s.
1950s. Not to mention that Who was
We've had
it?
since the 50s, and we've never figured out what these several times a week flashes of light on the moon are coming from. So, and the flashes, what they mean by flashes, they can last hours. So it's not just like a quick little thing. It's we're talking about areas lit up. I don't know why the hell they're using the word flash when it lasts for hours in certain occasions. But yeah, they have no idea what it costs, or what the cause is, or what could cause it. As usual, it's swamp gas. Is their best guess.
It's electrically charged particles that of the solar wind that react with moon dust.
Yeah, so it's there's okay, I could see some level of possibility there, but the point is that you can decide when you want to just ignore what's in front of your face. Think about it. Pick somebody you think of as opposition to you, and now think about trying to get them to see your point of view for a moment and see how much they can completely ignore evidence, completely ignore and come up with some crazy bullshit sideways way of looking at it and believe it 100% regardless of how ridiculous it looks. The same is true of you, same is true of me, same is true of everyone. I know everybody doesn't want to believe that's true of themselves, and they just believe it's true of everyone else, but consider for a moment that maybe you're human. And just maybe, and that you do the same thing, that you'll come up with these long convoluted excuses to believe whatever it is you want to believe. And so you have to do that every once in a while to reassess new information. And that's all I'm saying here is reassess a vast amount of information where there's all these various overlaps of the same information pointing to different information, pointing to the same phenomena. Various different sources, various different things, all of them pointing to the same phenomena, and that is, these things do not seem to be, unless of course it's just other countries that really don't like us all that much, have way better technology than us, and are just they're just
waiting on.
They just like us so much that or they just don't feel like taking us over. They just don't feel like it, They're like, fuck it, let them, and also we're not using any of this super hyper advanced technology either against other countries. Which do you really believe those things? Do you believe that one of these countries? Is
Russia our enemy, or are they?
Yeah, is Russia our enemy, or are they like, are they just like, yeah, you poor things, we're so fucking hyper advanced beyond us, you can't even understand our physics. And we're just gonna fuck around with your military and do whatever the fuck we like, except for the lulz. Except when you go and cause all these various issues with us, then we're gonna hold back. We're gonna, all these different various. We're gonna hold back.
And we're gonna resort to cyber hacking.
Right, and come on, really? And the same thing is true. It's like,
China.
Well, are we just putting up with all the shenanigans of these other countries, or do we have this vastly superior technology that where when you've got technology that superior, the things that you can do are not limited to just space flight. They're not limited to just that kind of technology spreads out into a vast number of different types of inventions and things that you can do with that level of advancement in physical knowledge and the knowledge of energy manipulation, etc., that's required for the sorts of things that we're talking about here. Any country that had that level of technological advancement would not give a great big flying fuck what the other countries are doing, because they just control them. Period. They just have them. At most they just be kind of being nice, but you wouldn't. Being that far ahead changes the way that you interact. In other words, it would be that country being that far ahead, the way that they would interact with the world would be vastly different than the way that all the biggest players in this world are interacting with each other.
Yep.
There's a lot of reasons why saying it's just some advanced technology that we have just doesn't fucking make any sense.
Yeah. So the moon flashes, actually, as they were saying, the flashes can be gas on the moon's reflecting light.
Swamp gas off the weather balloon.
Yep, swamp gas reflected off of the weather balloon, and yet they still are spending a lot of money on monitoring it. Why? They actually have a pretty sophisticated system of having cameras that two cameras at least, that keep an eye on the moon night after night. When both cameras register luminous phenomena at the same time, the telescope triggers further action, and they're continuing to monitor this because they're that interested in swamp gas. Wow. Fascinating. Another thing, though, the moon, is the fun, awesome new thing that just came out 7 days ago. There's an anomaly on the moon's south pole, and they think it's an asteroid grave. However, a completely, totally metal asteroid. That's a thing. But I did want to ask you...
Well, I mean, some asteroids do have a lot of metal.
A lot of metal, yeah. But let me describe this in a minute. But who was it that said stepped foot on the moon and it rang like a bell?
No, it wasn't they stepped foot on it. It's that they dropped a probe or dropped a satellite. Something got dropped on the moon, and the moon rang like a bell for hours.
I just want to know who quoted that.
Oh, that's like that's so well known. I mean, I'm sure you could just Google it. It's like,
probably.
Moon rang like a bell. Let's see.
So that was goes back to the 50s, 60s, like really long time ago. Is what I'm trying to gauge, is sort of the timeline of our perception of the moon as being
yeah. So
metal.
The point is that it behaved as though it were hollow, and
perhaps a satellite.
Yeah, like a hollow metal sphere is what it behaved like, and it's the seismic waves traveling across the surface from just this small impact doesn't make sense, based on a moon of the kind that we typically think of. Now, there's lots of reasons that people have come up with that's not it doesn't really matter, and it's there's other excuses, but given now all these other phenomena, perhaps it's not so outlandish that there may be something more going on the moon than is completely mundane. And so it's just one of a wide variety of things that now that we know that there are things going on that are beyond our science, beyond our, and they're absolutely irrefutable at this point, that there's UFOs, period. That's not refutable. That's just, it's no longer something you can talk about as like, I don't believe it, because well, I mean, I guess if you're a conspiracy theorist, it's like, well, our government and all the other governments are in a big conspiracy to make everyone believe that there are UFOs. Sure, you can believe that, I suppose. Whatever. But the truth of the matter is,
go ahead.
It's accepted by civilization now. There are UFOs. That's it. What they are, where they come from. Okay, you can start arguing about all that, but the fact that they're there and they're behaving in certain ways that make no sense according to physics, etc., that is not something that is up for discussion, really. I mean, everything's up for discussion technically. You can argue that the moon's made of green cheese if you like, but the accepted evidence and the number of people who've witnessed it and all of these things make it absurd to really go back to the 90s, where the idea of UFOs being there was just silly and ridiculous. And now cats are fighting like cats. Stop. They're really tearing it up there. So that's just the point. It's like, so now the discussion has changed, and a lot of people don't realize how much the discussion has changed, how much it is just a kind of a fact of observation now, and that hasn't been disseminated very far. So there's a lot of people who are still stuck back in the 90s or the 80s or whatever, not really knowing how much evidence there is, not knowing how many different changes have happened in our scientific knowledge level, our technological level, and the perspective that gives, and as well as our observations and releases of information. All of those things have changed dramatically in just the past 10 years, and a lot of older people don't really keep up with something that only happened in a decade. That's too fast for them, and so you still do have tons of people who are going to be way fucking behind on this. They're not going to accept new information, no matter how widespread it is, no matter how irrefutable it is. They're just going to fall back on their older information. But the truth of the matter is, there is lots of new information. There is something going on. And so that's the thing that I think people need to start looking at if you like being curious and wondering about what's going on there. I guess the final thing really
I got more.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just having to deal with them.
Yeah.
And also I couldn't get this image to work. Now, okay, so this is the crater Doesn't look like a crater to me, but whatever. Looks more like a hole inside the moon, but that's fine. What they're calling it is a crater, and that it is 1,240 miles across, or 2,000 kilometers across the far side of the moon, making it the largest crater that planetary scientists know of to date. Now, they're calling it, imagine taking a pile of metal 5 times larger than the big island of Hawaii and burying it underground. Because that's roughly how much unexpected mass we detected. And another interesting thing about it, aside from being a massive amount of unexpected mass, is that, and of course they think it was a metal asteroid that crashed, creating the crater and leaving all this metal behind. The interesting thing here is that the way they found out about it is that they were looking at the gravitational tug of the moon. And they noticed that there was an increased tug that has to do with the South Pole Aitken Basin. And they're like, well, what is happening? And another thing is that, well, their explanation is that, one of the explanations anyway, of this extra mass.
Is the South Pole or just the
South
side?
Pole of the moon.
Yeah, okay. So in other words, it's something that's obviously deeper, and therefore we can, there's a lot of questions about whether or not it's only there or it could possibly be elsewhere. We're not probing as deeply in other places as we are right there, because of the fact that that's like, it's obviously deeper than other places since it's a larger crater.
Well, here's the interesting thing about that, though, is so one of the explanations of this extra mass is that, so there's basically mass that they found through a gravitational tug that they didn't account for, and they're thinking that it has to do, that it was the metal from the asteroid that formed the crater and is still embedded in the moon's mantle. However it formed, the fact that the mass anomaly is still so prominent, and that it seems to be located 186 miles, or 300 kilometers, down, also offers scientists an intriguing idea. These facts suggest that the moon's insides can't be all that gooey. If they were, the moon's gravity would pull this massive patch into the lunar center.
Yeah.
So not only is there this interesting corroborating evidence, or rather, not evidence,
that the inside of the moon,
right, the inside of the moon, well,
may not be
that
as
it
we
rang like a bell.
Expect.
Yeah, it rang like a bell. There was all this metal at its base, and to me, it looks like a big old hole to go inside.
And there's astronauts who are on the moon who specifically said that there's aliens up there. Period.
But we don't listen to those astronauts. We just listen to all the other ones.
Yeah, we don't listen to those astronauts who are like, no, there's specifically fucking technology up there. I saw it my goddamn self. I was fucking there. Fuck you. That's what more than one astronaut has basically said. And or we could just believe they're crazy. All the other people are crazy. We can ignore all of these massive amounts of other evidence. It's all just unexplained. I'm going to leave it unexplained. I'm not going to deal with it in my head, but I'm going to deny that it's this one thing. I don't know what the fuck it is, but I'm definitely going to deny for sure it's this one thing.
Sounds
that
like
all of them
atheists.
tend to all these things tend to point towards.
Sorry, I like to poke fun of atheists when I can. But I don't know what it is, but it definitely isn't that. It's like, okay.
Maybe you gotta be a little more agnostic, not just
maybe just a little bit. Okay, so I didn't realize what time it was.
Oh shit.
Yeah. Can you navigate to the thing we gotta go to and reach out to some of those people while we'll have a song playing us out, and we will see you all next Monday in a little bit more relaxed CherrySTEM.
But yeah, hop on below. Tell me why I'm full of shit. And
leave us comments.
Or say, yeah, that's fucking interesting. I'm gonna look into it. Whatever you like. But yeah, leave some comments. Duke it out with some people, because this shit's fun. It's if nothing else. I mean, we can't really speak authoritatively about it, even though there is certain things that you could say. Yeah, that Navy definitely said this, and there's things like that you can at least say somebody said something. But when it comes down to it, we can't know a lot of things for sure.
And that's all we're saying. We're saying all these people said this thing,
Well,
and
I'm also saying my opinion. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm saying my opinion and my belief that it's like that it's very strongly leaning towards there's something going on in our world that is not what we have believed for a long period of time, and that the advancement of technology and knowledge and information and things has made it where now we're starting to understand that our beliefs from the past may just be belief systems. systems that we were upholding for way too long, and now we have overwhelming evidence, and we're just having a hard time accepting what we're seeing right in front of our eyes. That's what humans do. But hey, that's my belief.
Let us know what you think.
Let us know what you think. Give them the comments below. I love your faces.
And we'll see you Monday.
Smash that like button. Follow, subscribe, do all that shit.
Do the thing. Help us grow so we can annoy more and more people with
or
our
I will punch you
speculation.
in the nads instead of the throat.
I'll punch your grandma in the throat.
I'll punch your grandma in the nads.
That's right. All right. Leave a thumbs up. Leave a comment if you agree or disagree with us. And we will see you all on Monday. Next Monday. Hopefully.
Theoretically.
Maybe. Definitely join our Discord. I will leave it in the pinned comment along with some other things. That should be ready in a bit. So we'll see you all later. Thanks for listening.